My nephew whispered, I am scared of mommy. I called the police. Aunt Sarah, can you come help me with something? My nephew Jake's voice was barely above a whisper as he tugged on my sleeve. The rest of my family was gathered around the dining table, still laughing over dessert from my mom's 60th birthday dinner. Jake had been unusually quiet all evening, picking at his cake and staying glued to my side instead of running around with his usual 5-year-old energy. Of course, buddy. What do you need? I followed him down the hallway toward the bathroom, assuming he needed help reaching something or had spilled on his shirt. But instead of going into the bathroom, Jake pulled me into the guest bedroom and quietly closed the door behind us. His big brown eyes darted toward the door nervously before he motioned for me to lean down. When I crouched to his level, he cupped his small hands around my ear and whispered 6 words that made my blood run cold. Aunt Sarah, I am scared of mommy. I pulled back to look at his face, trying to keep my expression calm even as my heart started racing. What do you mean, sweetheart? Scared how? Jake's eyes filled with tears and he looked toward the door again. She gets really angry when daddy's at work. She hurts me. His voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear him. But she said if I tell anyone, it will be worse. My hands were trembling as I gently took his shoulders. Jake, can you show me where she hurts you? He hesitated for a long moment, then slowly lifted up his dinosaur t-shirt. My stomach dropped. There were finger-shaped bruises on his ribs, faded yellow and green like they were maybe a week old. He turned around and pulled up the back of his shirt, revealing more bruising along his shoulder blades. Oh, honey, I breathed, fighting to keep my voice steady. She says I'm clumsy and I fall down a lot, Jake whispered, repeating what were obviously my sister's words. But I don't fall down, Aunt Sarah. I don't. I pulled him into the gentlest hug, my mind reeling. My sister Emma had always been the golden child, straight A's, full scholarship to college, married her high school sweetheart, perfect house in the suburbs. She was the one my parents constantly held up as an example. The one who seemed to have it all figured out. But as I held Jake's tiny, trembling body, pieces started clicking into place. How he'd been more withdrawn at family gatherings lately. How Emma always seemed to have an explanation ready when Jake had a bruise or cut. He fell off his bike, he ran into a door, he was just a clumsy kid. How Jake would freeze whenever Emma's voice got sharp, even over something minor. Jake, listen to me very carefully, I whispered. You did the right thing telling me. This is not your fault, and you're not in trouble. Okay? He nodded against my shoulder, still crying silently. I need to ask you something important. Has Daddy ever hurt you like this? No, Jake shook his head immediately. Daddy's nice. But Daddy works lots and lots. Mommy says he's too busy to know about the falling down. From the dining room, I could hear Emma's laugh ringing out over some story she was telling. That same bright, cheerful laugh I'd grown up hearing. The laugh of someone who had never put a foot wrong in my parents' eyes. I closed my eyes and made a decision that I knew would change everything. Jake, we're going to fix this. I promise. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. I had to sit at that dining room table, making small talk and pretending to laugh at my dad's terrible jokes, all while Jake sat pressed against my side and Emma beamed across from us like the picture-perfect mother she always appeared to be. Jake, come sit by mommy, Emma said during a lull in conversation, patting her lap with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You've been glued to Aunt Sarah all night. I felt Jake's entire body tense against me. His small hand gripped my arm so tightly his knuckles went white. He's fine here, I said quickly, putting my arm around him. We're having fun, aren't we, buddy? Emma's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. Jake needs to learn not to be so clingy. Come on, baby, mommy missed you. I want to stay with Aunt Sarah, Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. Jacob Michael. Emma's tone sharpened, and I watched Jake flinch like he'd been struck. The entire table went quiet. Emma immediately caught herself and laughed, back to that bright cheerful sound. Sorry, you know how 5-year-olds can be. He's been going through a difficult phase lately. My mother nodded sympathetically. Sarah went through something similar at that age. Very clingy, always wanted attention. I wanted to scream. Instead, I checked my phone. 8:47 p.m. You know what, I should probably get going soon anyway. Early day tomorrow. I looked down at Jake. Want to help me gather my things? Jake nodded eagerly, practically jumping off his chair. I'll come too, Emma started to stand. No, stay and enjoy your coffee, I said, already heading toward the guest room where I'd left my purse. We'll just be a minute. Once we were alone again, I knelt down to Jake's level. Honey, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm going to call some people who can help us, okay? But first, I need to know, has mommy ever told you what might happen if you told someone about the hurting? Jake's eyes went wide with fear. She said bad man would come and take me away from Daddy. And that Daddy would be very sad and it would be my fault. My heart broke all over again. Jake, that's not true. The people I'm going to call, they help keep little boys safe. They won't take you away from Daddy, I promise. What about mommy? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Mommy might have to go away for a while to learn how not to hurt people. But you'll be safe. Jake was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he whispered, will you stay with me? Every step of the way, I promised. When we returned to the dining room, Emma immediately stood. There you are. Ready to head home, sweetie? Jake moved behind me, using my body as a shield. Emma's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Actually, I said, my pulse hammering, I was wondering if Jake could have a sleepover at my place tonight? It's been so long since we've had uncle-nephew time. That's not really, Emma started. Oh, what a wonderful idea, my mother interrupted. Jake would love that, wouldn't you, sweetie? Emma's smile looked like it was carved from ice. Jake has soccer practice early tomorrow morning. I can take him, I said. What time? I watched Emma's mind work, trying to find a reason to say no that wouldn't seem unreasonable to the rest of the family. Behind me, Jake's small hand found mine and squeezed. Fine, Emma said finally. But just for tonight. As everyone said their goodbyes, Emma hugged Jake a little too tightly and whispered something in his ear that made him go rigid. When she pulled away, her smile was back in place, but her eyes were cold as winter. Be good for Aunt Sarah, she said sweetly. Remember what we talked about. The moment I closed my apartment door behind us, I felt Jake's entire body relax. He wandered around my living room like he was seeing it for the first time, even though he'd been here dozens of times before. But tonight was different. Tonight, he didn't have to perform. Are you hungry, buddy? Thirsty? I asked, trying to keep my voice normal while my hand still shook from what I was about to do. Can I have some water? He asked quietly, settling onto my couch and pulling one of my throw pillows into his lap like a shield. While he sipped his water and watched cartoons, I stepped into my kitchen and pulled out my phone. My fingers hovered over the keypad. Once I made this call, there would be no going back. Emma would know exactly who had betrayed the family. My parents would be devastated. Christmas dinners would never be the same. But then I looked at Jake, curled up on my couch in his dinosaur pajamas, and I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report suspected child abuse, I whispered, moving further into the kitchen. My 5-year-old nephew told me his mother has been hitting him, and I've seen bruises. The dispatcher was incredibly kind and professional. She took down all the basic information, names, addresses, Jake's age. She explained that they would send an officer to take a preliminary report, and that Child Protective Services would likely want to interview Jake tomorrow. Is the child in immediate danger right now? She asked. I glanced at Jake, who was actually smiling at something on the TV. No, he's safe with me tonight. His mother thinks he's just having a sleepover. Good. An officer should be there within the hour. In the meantime, try not to coach the child or ask leading questions. I know that's hard, but it's important for the investigation. After I hung up, my phone immediately started buzzing with text messages. Emma, 9:23 p.m. Hope Jake isn't giving you too much trouble. He's been having behavioral issues lately. Emma, 9:24 p.m. If he acts up, just put him in timeout. He responds well to firm discipline. Emma, 9:26 p.m. Call me if you need anything. Enjoy your sleepover. Smiling face with smiling eyes. The casual way she texted, the smiley face emoji, it made my skin crawl. This was the same woman who had left finger-shaped bruises on her son's ribs. Aunt Sarah? Jake's voice pulled me back to the living room. Can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. He muted the TV and turned to face me, his expression more serious than any 5-year-old should ever look. When Mommy gets mad at me, sometimes she says Daddy doesn't really want me. She says I was an accident and I make everything harder. His voice was matter of fact, like he was reciting his address. Is that true? I felt tears prick my eyes. Oh, Jake. No, honey, that's absolutely not true. Your daddy loves you so much. You know how his face lights up every time he sees you? You're the best thing that ever happened to him. Jake considered this. Then why does Mommy say it? How do you explain emotional abuse to a kindergartner? Sometimes when grown-ups are feeling bad inside, they say mean things that aren't true. It doesn't make it okay, but it's not about you. It's about them. At 10:17 p.m., there was a soft knock at my door. I looked through the peephole to see 2 police officers, a woman who looked to be in her 40s and a younger man. Jake, remember how I said some people were coming to help us? I knelt down beside the couch. They're here now. They're going to ask you some questions about Mommy, okay? Just tell them the truth, like you told me. Jake nodded solemnly, clutching his water cup. I opened the door, and Officer Martinez introduced herself and her partner, Officer Chin. They were both incredibly gentle with Jake, sitting on the floor to be at his eye level, speaking in calm, reassuring voices. Jake, can you tell us about the bruises on your chest? Officer Martinez asked. And just like that, my nephew began to unravel the carefully constructed lie that had been his entire world. Jake's voice was steady as he told the officers everything. How Emma would wait until his father left for work, then find reasons to get angry. How she'd grab him hard enough to leave marks, shake him, push him into walls. How she'd coached him on what to say if anyone asked about bruises, that he was clumsy, that he fell a lot, that boys his age were always getting hurt. She practices with me, Jake said, his small hands folded in his lap. She makes me say the falling down story until I get it right. Officer Martinez and Officer Chen exchanged a look that made my stomach clench. This wasn't just physical abuse, this was systematic manipulation of a child. Jake, you're being very brave, Officer Chen said gently. Can you tell us about today? Did anything happen before you came to Grandma's house? Jake nodded. I spilled juice on my shirt this morning. Mommy got really mad and grabbed my arms hard. He pushed up the sleeves of his pajamas, revealing faint finger marks I hadn't noticed before. Fresh ones. She said if I embarrassed her at the party, she'd make sure I was really sorry. My phone buzzed. Another text from Emma. Emma, 10:31 p.m. Jake's probably getting sleepy. He gets cranky when he stays up past his bedtime. Don't let him manipulate you, he's been telling stories lately for attention. The timing made my blood run cold. It was like she knew. Officer Martinez asked to photograph Jake's bruises, and he cooperated with heartbreaking matter-of-factness. Lifting his shirt and turning around like this was just another normal thing adults asked him to do. Each flash of the camera felt like evidence of my family's collective failure to protect him. What happens next? I asked the officers while Jake used my bathroom. CPS will assign a caseworker first thing Monday morning, Officer Martinez explained, keeping her voice low. They'll want to interview Jake in a more formal setting, probably at the Child Advocacy Center. They'll also need to speak with his father and, eventually, his mother. What about tonight? Tomorrow? The child can stay with you as long as you're willing and able to care for him. We'll file an emergency report that should prevent the mother from removing him from your custody until CPS can investigate. Officer Chin pulled out his notepad. We'll need to know, does the mother have any history of violence? Mental health issues? Substance abuse? I shook my head slowly. That's what makes this so hard to believe for everyone else. Emma's always been perfect. Valedictorian, college graduate, married to her high school sweetheart. She volunteers at Jake's school, organizes neighborhood events. Everyone adores her. Classic pattern, Officer Martinez said grimly. The most dangerous abusers are often the ones who appear most normal to the outside world. After the officers left, I helped Jake get ready for bed in my spare room. He brushed his teeth without being asked, put his pajamas in my hamper, and climbed into bed like he'd been doing it his whole life. "Aunt Sarah," he said as I tucked him in. "Are you going to get in trouble for helping me?" The question gutted me. "Maybe," I said honestly. "Some people might be upset with me. But that's okay, because keeping you safe is more important." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Mommy says nobody would believe me anyway because I'm just a kid and kids lie about everything." "Well, those officers believed you. And I believe you. And that's what matters." At 11:43 p.m., my phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it, my heart pounding. 4 rings. 5. 6. Then it stopped. Immediately, it started ringing again. This time, I answered. "Sarah?" Emma's voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk." "What about, Emma?" I kept my voice level, even though my hands were shaking. "Don't play dumb with me." Her perfect composure was cracking, and I could hear something dangerous underneath. "I know exactly what you're doing. Jake's been filling your head with his little stories, hasn't he?" I walked further away from the spare room, not wanting Jake to overhear. "What stories?" Emma let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, come on, Sarah. The bruises? The crying? He's 5 years old and desperate for attention. Ever since Mark started working those longer hours, Jake's been acting out, hurting himself, making up these elaborate fantasies about me being some kind of monster. He's not making anything up, Emma." The silence stretched between us for a long moment. When Emma spoke again, her voice was ice cold. "You called the police." It wasn't a question. My blood ran cold. "How do you?" "My neighbor Mrs. Chen saw the patrol car at your building. She knows I have a sister on Maple Street." Emma's voice was getting sharper, more frantic. "Do you have any idea what you've done? What you've started?" "I protected a child who was being abused by his own mother." "Abused?" Emma's voice exploded through the phone, and I had to hold it away from my ear. "I have never laid a hand on my son. Jake is clumsy, Sarah. He's always been clumsy. He runs into things, he falls down, he bruises easily just like I did when we were kids. Remember? Mom was constantly explaining away my bruises too. But that wasn't how I remembered our childhood at all. Emma had been graceful, coordinated, the star of her dance team. I was the clumsy one. Emma, I saw the finger marks on his ribs. On his arms. Those aren't from falling down. You saw what you wanted to see because you've always been jealous of me." Her voice turned vicious. Poor Sarah, the screw-up sister, finally gets a chance to tear down perfect Emma. "This is about you, not Jake." I felt like I'd been slapped. "This has nothing to do with..." "Doesn't it? You're 28 and single, no kids, jumping from job to job. Mom and Dad are constantly worried about you while I've got my life together. And now you get to play hero, rescue my son from the terrible mother who is everything you want. Stop it, Emma. Where is he? Where's Jake? He's safe. He's my son, Sarah. Mine. Not yours. You have no right. I have every right to protect him when his own mother won't." Emma was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice had shifted into something that made my skin crawl. Sweet. Reasonable. The voice she used with my parents. "Sarah, honey, I think you're having some kind of breakdown. This isn't like you. Jake probably told you some silly story about playing too rough, and you've blown it completely out of proportion." She paused. "I'm worried about you. Maybe you should talk to someone professional." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for just a second I doubted myself. Then I remembered Jake's terrified whisper, the way he'd flinched when she'd sharpened her voice at dinner. "I'm not having a breakdown, Emma. I'm not confused. And I'm not giving Jake back to you. You can't keep my son from me. I'll call the police myself, report him kidnapped." "Go ahead. They already know he's here. They know why." Another long silence. "Then, you have no idea what you've unleashed, do you? When this investigation starts, they'll dig into everything. Everything, Sarah. Mark's business, our finances, our marriage. Jake will be questioned by strangers, poked and prodded, traumatized by the very system you think is going to save him." My resolve wavered slightly. "Emma. And when they find nothing because there's nothing to find, where does that leave Jake? Where does that leave our family? Mom and Dad will never forgive you for putting us through this nightmare over a 5-year-old's imagination. She was good. She was so good at this. Mom's already texting me, you know," Emma continued. "Asking if I've heard from you, saying Jake seemed off tonight. When she finds out what you've done, how you betrayed our family." "Emma, just stop. Please. Bring him home, Sarah. Tonight. We can fix this. We can tell everyone it was all a misunderstanding, that Jake had a bad dream or something. No one has to know about the police report. It's too late for that." "No, it's not. It's only too late when that CPS caseworker shows up Monday morning and starts treating my family like criminals." At 12:17 a.m., 3 hours after I'd made the hardest phone call of my life, I was being offered a way out. All I had to do was betray the little boy sleeping in my spare room. I hung up on Emma and immediately turned off my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely work the power button. The apartment felt suffocatingly quiet. I checked on Jake, still fast asleep, one small hand clutched around the stuffed elephant I'd given him last Christmas. He looked so peaceful, so innocent. Nothing like the manipulative attention seeker Emma had painted him as. But her words kept echoing in my head. "You've always been jealous of me, was that what this was really about? Some deep-seated resentment finally bubbling over?" I spent the next hour pacing my living room, replaying every interaction I'd had with Jake over the past few months. The way he'd become quieter at family gatherings. How he always wanted to sit next to me instead of playing with our cousins. The time he'd asked me if some mommies loved their kids less than others. At the time, I thought it was just typical 5-year-old curiosity. Now it felt like desperate attempts to tell someone what was happening. My phone buzzed on the counter. Even though it was off, I'd somehow gotten a voicemail. With trembling fingers, I powered it back on. 7 missed calls from Emma. 3 from my mom. 1 voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. The unknown number's message made my blood freeze. Miss Sarah? This is Mark, Jake's dad. Emma told me what's happening. I'm driving back from my conference now, should be there by 6 a.m. Emma said you think, she said you believe she's been hurting Jake. His voice cracked. I need to see him. I need to see my son. Please call me back. Mark. I barely considered how he'd react to all this. He worked 60-hour weeks at his consulting firm, traveled constantly for business. How much did he actually see when he was home? I called him back immediately. Sarah, thank God. Mark sounded exhausted, desperate. Where's Jake? Is he okay? He's sleeping. Mark, did Emma tell you what he said? About the bruises? She said he's been having behavioral problems, making up stories for attention. But Sarah, you've known Jake since he was born. Does he seem like the type to make something like this up? That question hit me like a physical blow. Because Jake wasn't dramatic or attention-seeking. He was quiet, thoughtful, almost unnaturally well-behaved for a 5-year-old. No, I whispered. He's not. Mark was quiet for a long moment. I found something tonight, Sarah. After Emma called to tell me what was happening, I went through some of our recent photos on her phone. There's one from 2 weeks ago, Jake at his soccer game. Emma posted it on Facebook with some caption about being proud of her little athlete. Okay? But Sarah, in the background of the photo, there's a clear shot of bruising on Jake's upper arm. Finger-shaped bruises, exactly like what you described to the police. Emma cropped the photo before posting it, but the original is still in her camera roll. My knees nearly buckled. Mark. There are others. For photos over the past month where you can see marks on him if you look closely. Always in places that would be covered by his clothes. Mark's voice broke completely. How could I miss this? How could I not see what was happening to my own son? You were traveling, working. That's not an excuse. Emma kept telling me Jake was going through a difficult phase, that he was acting out when I wasn't around. She said he'd been falling a lot, getting into accidents. I believed her because why wouldn't I believe my wife? Through my living room window, I could see the first hint of dawn creeping across the sky. In just a few hours, this would all become official. CPS would get involved, investigators would start asking questions, and our family would never be the same. Mark, Emma called me tonight. She tried to convince me to bring Jake back, to call off the investigation. What did you tell her? That it was too late. Good. His voice was firm now, resolved. Sarah, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with Emma, whatever this costs our family, you did the right thing. Jake is the only thing that matters now. At 4:43 a.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I stared at my mother's name on the phone screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. At 4:43 a.m., this couldn't be good news. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, but I knew she'd just keep calling. Hi, Mom. Sarah Elizabeth, what in God's name is going on? Mom's voice was sharp with panic and confusion. Emma just called me sobbing, saying you've accused her of hurting Jake. She says you called the police and won't let her see her own son. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of this moment. Once I said the words out loud to my mother, there would be no pretending this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Mom, Jake told me Emma has been hitting him. He showed me bruises shaped like fingerprints. I had to report it. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Mom finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. That's impossible. Emma would never. Sarah, she's a wonderful mother. You've seen them together. I've seen what she wants us to see. But Jake doesn't lie, Mom. You know he doesn't. He's 5 years old. 5-year-olds have vivid imaginations, they get confused. He's not confused about finger-shaped bruises on his ribs. I heard Mom's sharp intake of breath. Emma said he's been having behavioral issues. Acting out, hurting himself for attention because Mark's been working so much. It was like listening to Emma's script being read back to me word for word. How long had my sister been laying this groundwork? How many conversations had she had with our parents, carefully planting seeds about Jake's behavioral problems and accidents? Mom, when's the last time you actually looked at Jake? Really looked at him? He's been getting quieter and more withdrawn for months. Well, yes, but Emma explained that he's been going through an adjustment period. Emma explained. Emma always has an explanation, doesn't she? My voice was getting sharper despite my efforts to stay calm. Just like she had explanations tonight when he flinched every time she spoke to him. You're being ridiculous, Sarah. Emma is my daughter too, and I know her. She's not capable of something like this. That phrase hit me like a slap. She's my daughter too, as if I was some outsider making wild accusations against a stranger. What about Jake, Mom? He's your grandson. Doesn't he deserve to be heard? Of course he does, but not like this. Not by having his family torn apart by police and social workers and investigations. Mom's voice cracked. Do you know what this is going to do to Emma's reputation? To Mark's business? They could lose everything because of some misunderstanding. This isn't a misunderstanding. Your father and I are driving over there right now. To Emma's house. We're going to sort this out as a family, the way we should have from the beginning. Ice ran through my veins. Mom, no. Don't do that. Emma needs our support right now, not accusations from her own sister. If you go over there at 5 in the morning, you're going to make everything worse. There's an active police report now. CPS is going to investigate. You can't just make this disappear. But I was talking to dead air. Mom had already hung up. I immediately called Mark back. He answered on the first ring. Sarah? Mark, my parents are driving to your house right now. They want to sort this out as a family. You need to know that Emma's been telling them Jake has behavioral problems, that he's been hurting himself for attention. Shit. Mark was quiet for a moment. They believe her, don't they? They want to believe her. She spent months setting up this narrative about Jake being troubled and accident-prone. When I told my mom about the bruises, she had an immediate explanation ready. I'm about an hour out from home still. Sarah, whatever happens when your parents get there, whatever Emma tells them, you cannot let them convince you to bring Jake back. Not until CPS has a chance to investigate. At 5:23 a.m., Emma called again. This time, she wasn't alone. Sarah, it's Dad. My father's voice was stern, disappointed. The tone he'd used when I was 10 and had broken Mom's favorite vase. We're here with Emma, and she's in quite a state. This has gone far enough. Dad. Now, I don't know what Jake said to you, but Emma's explained the whole situation. The boy's been having a rough time lately, acting out since Mark's been traveling more. You know how kids can be when their routine gets disrupted. In the background, I could hear Emma crying. Soft, heartbroken sobs that would melt anyone's heart. She was good at this. She was so incredibly good at playing the victim. Emma's told us about Jake's accidents over the past few months, Dad continued. The falling, the bruising. She's actually been worried about taking him to the doctor because she was afraid people might get the wrong idea about all his injuries. The manipulation was breathtaking. Emma had somehow turned her systematic abuse into evidence of her good mothering. She was so concerned about Jake's clumsiness that she worried how it would look to medical professionals. Dad, please listen to me. I saw fingerprint bruises on Jake's chest and back. That's not from falling down. Sarah, honey. Now it was Mom's voice, gentle and coaxing. Emma says Jake's been telling stories lately. Making things up. It's not uncommon for children his age when they're feeling insecure. Bring him home. That was Emma, her voice thick with tears. Please, Sarah. I just want my baby back. I looked toward the spare room where Jake was sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knows how long. No. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Sarah, Dad's voice turned hard. You're making a terrible mistake. When this investigation finds nothing wrong, when it becomes clear that you put this family through hell over a child's imagination, there will be consequences. The threat was clear. Choose Jake, lose my family. I took a deep breath and made my choice. Then so be it. I hung up on my parents and immediately double-checked that my front door was locked. My hands were still trembling as I activated the deadbolt and security chain. At 5:31 a.m., I called Officer Martinez's direct number that she'd given me before leaving. Martinez. Officer Martinez, this is Sarah Chen. You interviewed my nephew Jake a few hours ago? I think Emma, his mother, might be on her way here with my parents. They're trying to convince me to return Jake to her custody before CPS gets involved. Are you in immediate danger? I don't think so, but they're pretty desperate to get Jake back. My dad basically threatened me if this investigation doesn't go their way. Okay, Ms. Chen. I'm going to have a patrol car swing by your building every hour until the CPS caseworker can meet with you Monday morning. Do not, under any circumstances, allow anyone to remove Jake from your custody without a court order. That includes family members. After hanging up, I made coffee with shaking hands and checked on Jake. Still sleeping soundly, his small face peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. The morning light streaming through the blinds illuminated just how thin he'd gotten. When had he lost so much weight? How had none of us noticed? At 6:47 a.m., there was aggressive pounding on my door. Sarah. Open this door right now. Emma's voice was raw, desperate. Gone was any pretense of the perfect mother routine. Jake shot upright in bed, instantly awake and terrified. Is that Mommy? Yes, but you're safe. She can't come in. I guided him away from the front of the apartment toward my bedroom in the back. Remember what I promised? You're not going anywhere you don't want to go. The pounding continued, accompanied now by my father's booming voice. Sarah Elizabeth Chen. You open this door and stop this nonsense immediately. She found me, Jake whispered, his whole body starting to shake. She said she always would. I knelt down and took his small hands in mine. Jake, look at me. She cannot get in here. The police know you're here. The people who help keep kids safe know you're here. She cannot take you. Sarah. Emma's voice cracked like a whip. I know you can hear me. Jake, baby, if you can hear Mommy, I need you to tell Aunt Sarah you want to come home now. Jake pressed his face against my shoulder, his entire body rigid with terror. This wasn't the reaction of a child who'd made up stories for attention. This was pure, primal fear. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk unknown, 6:52 a.m. Sarah, this is Mark. I'm 10 minutes away. Do not let them take Jake. Emma just called me screaming that you poisoned him against her. She's losing it, asterisk. Another text immediately followed. Asterisk unknown, 6:52 a.m. She said something about Jake paying the price for embarrassing her. I've never heard her sound like this before, asterisk. The pounding stopped suddenly, and I heard muffled voices in the hallway. Then my mother's voice, much softer, right against the door. Sarah, sweetheart, it's just Mom. Emma and Dad went to get some coffee. Can we talk? Just the two of us? I knew it was a trap, but Mom sounded genuinely upset, not angry. Against my better judgment, I approached the door but didn't unlock it. What do you want to say, Mom? I need to understand what's happening. Really understand. Because the Emma I know, the daughter I raised, she couldn't do what you're saying she's done. Through the door, I heard something I'd never heard before in my mother's voice, doubt. But Jake, Mom continued quietly, Jake doesn't lie. In 5 years, that boy has never told a lie. Not even little ones about cookies before dinner or washing his hands. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally getting through to someone. Mom, Jake showed me bruises shaped like fingerprints. On his ribs, on his back. He told me Emma waits until Mark leaves for work, then finds reasons to get angry with him. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When Mom spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Is there any chance at all, that you misunderstood what you saw? Before I could answer, Jake tugged on my shirt. Aunt Sarah, can I tell Grandma something? My heart clenched. Jake, you don't have to. I want to. His voice was small but determined. I crouched down so he could speak toward the door. Grandma? It's Jake. Oh, sweetheart. Mom's voice immediately brightened with forced cheer. Grandma's here, baby. Are you okay? Grandma, Mommy told me that if I ever told anyone about the hurting, she would make sure I never saw Daddy again. She said Daddy would believe it was my fault and wouldn't love me anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear Mom's sharp, shaky breathing through the door. Jake, Mom's voice cracked. What kind of hurting, baby? When she gets really mad, she grabs me really tight and shakes me. Sometimes she pushes me into walls. She says it's because I'm bad and I make everything difficult for Daddy. Oh my God. Mom's whisper was barely audible. Oh my God, Sarah. That's when I heard Emma's voice from down the hallway, sharp and furious. Mom. Get away from that door right now. Emma, I said get away from the door. We're going home. All of us. Right now. But Mom's voice came through the door one more time, stronger now. Sarah, don't you dare let him go back with her. Not until someone official talks to him. I heard footsteps retreating, then Emma's voice echoing in the hallway. Mom, you have no idea what Sarah's put Jake up to. She's been coaching him, filling his head with lies. Emma Catherine. Mom's voice was ice cold. That boy has never lied about anything in his entire life. Not once. He's lying now. He's a 5-year-old who's been manipulated by his aunt who's jealous of our family. Their voices faded as they moved toward the elevators, but I could hear the argument escalating. Dad's deeper voice joined in, trying to mediate, but Mom was having none of it. At 7:23 a.m., my phone rang. Mark's number. Sarah, I just pulled into the parking garage and saw Emma and your parents by their car. Emma is screaming at your mother about betrayal and family loyalty. What happened? Jake talked to my mom through the door. Told her about Emma threatening to make sure he never saw you again if he told anyone about the abuse. Mark was quiet for a long moment. That explains why he never said anything when I was home. Sarah, I'm coming up now. Emma's distracted arguing with your parents. This might be my only chance to see Jake before this all becomes official. 3 minutes later, there was a gentle knock at my door. Sarah, it's Mark. I looked through the peephole and saw Jake's father standing alone in the hallway, looking haggard and heartbroken. When I opened the door, Jake ran straight into his arms. Daddy. Jake burst into tears against Mark's shoulder. I thought Mommy was right and you wouldn't love me anymore. Mark's face crumpled as he held his son. Jake, I will always love you. Always. No matter what. That's when I realized we'd crossed a point of no return. Because Mark could see it too now, the fear, the relief, the desperation in his own son's embrace. There would be no going back to pretending everything was fine. Mark held Jake for nearly 10 minutes, and I watched 5 years of carefully constructed lies crumble in real time. Jake told his father everything, about the practice sessions where Emma would coach him on explaining away bruises, about being locked in his room when he cried too loudly, about Emma telling him that Daddy's work trips were to get away from his problem child. She made me promise never to bother you with my accidents, Jake whispered against Mark's neck. She said you worked so hard to take care of us and I was making everything worse by being clumsy. Mark's jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. Jake, look at Daddy. None of this is your fault. None of it. Daddy works because I love you and Mommy, not because I want to get away from you. At 7:47 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Asterisk Emma, 7:47 a.m. I know Mark is up there. You've turned my own husband against me. I hope you're proud of yourself, asterisk. Emma, 7:48 a.m. When this investigation finds nothing, when Jake admits he made everything up for attention, I will make sure everyone knows what you've done to our family. Asterisk Emma, 7:49 a.m. You'll never see Jake again. Ever asterisk. I showed the text to Mark, whose face went white. She's completely lost it. Sarah, this isn't the woman I married. This isn't even close to the Emma I thought I knew. How long has she been different? Really think about it. Mark ran a hand through his hair, still holding Jake with his other arm. The past year, maybe longer. She's been controlling. Critical. Always had an explanation for why Jake was hurt or upset. He paused, his eyes widening with realization. Last month, I came home early from a business trip because my meeting got cancelled. Jake was in his room crying, and Emma said he'd had a tantrum and she'd put him in timeout. But Sarah, he wasn't acting like a kid who'd had a tantrum. He was scared. What did you do? Nothing. I trusted my wife. The guilt in his voice was devastating. I asked Jake if he was okay, and he just nodded and said he'd been bad. Emma stood right there the whole time, watching. I should have known something was wrong. At 8:15 a.m., there was another knock at the door. This time it was my mother, alone. Sarah, it's just me. Emma and your father went back to Emma's house. I need to see Jake. I looked at Mark, who nodded. When I opened the door, Mom's eyes immediately went to the bruises on Jake's arms that were visible now that he was in a t-shirt. Oh, sweetheart, she breathed, approaching slowly like Jake might bolt. Grandma is so sorry no one listened to you sooner. Jake looked up at Mark, who gave him an encouraging nod. It's okay, buddy. You can talk to Grandma. Grandma, I wasn't lying, Jake said quietly. I know Mommy says I lie now, but I don't. You always said lying was wrong. Mom knelt down to Jake's eye level, tears streaming down her face. Jake, honey, Grandma believes you. I'm sorry it took me so long, but I believe you now. Are you going to make me go back to Mommy? The question hung in the air like a blade. Mom looked at Mark, then at me, then back at Jake. No, baby. You're going to stay with people who keep you safe until we figure out how to help Mommy get better. That's when my phone rang. CPS. Even though it was Sunday morning, they were already moving on the case. Ms. Chen? This is Patricia Williams from Child Protective Services. I understand you have Jake Morrison in your custody. We need to schedule an emergency interview for today. Everything was accelerating beyond anyone's control now. The CPS interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Child Advocacy Center downtown. Patricia Williams explained that Jake would be interviewed by a trained specialist in a child-friendly environment, while Mark and I would be questioned separately about what we'd witnessed. What about Emma? Mark asked during the phone call. When will she be interviewed? Mrs. Morrison will be contacted this afternoon and asked to come in tomorrow morning. We'll also need to inspect the family home and speak with Jake's pediatrician about his medical history. After hanging up, Mark pulled me aside while Jake watched cartoons with my mom. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Last night after Emma called me, I did more than just look through her photos. I went through her browser history on our shared tablet. My stomach clenched. What did you find? Searches about bruising patterns, how long different types of bruises take to heal, what kind of injuries look accidental versus intentional. His voice was barely above a whisper. She's been researching this, Sarah. She knew exactly what she was doing. The calculated nature of it made me feel sick. This wasn't a parent losing control in moments of stress, this was systematic, premeditated abuse. There's more, Mark continued. She's been documenting Jake's supposed behavioral issues in a journal. Entries about him being defiant, having tantrums, hurting himself. But Sarah, the dates don't match up with when I was home. According to her journal, Jake had a massive meltdown and threw himself down the stairs on Tuesday. But I was home Tuesday evening, and Jake was perfectly fine. She's been building a defense. 4 months. Maybe longer. Mark's hands were shaking. How long has she been planning to hurt him? At 11:30 a.m., Emma called Mark directly. He put it on speakerphone so I could hear. Mark, thank God. Emma's voice was strained but trying to sound normal. I've been so worried. How's Jake? Is he asking for mommy? He's fine, Emma. Good. Good. Listen, I know Sarah's filled your head with all sorts of crazy ideas, but we can fix this. We can get family counseling, maybe put Jake in therapy to help with his behavioral issues and these stories he's been telling. What behavioral issues, Emma? There was a pause. You know how he's been lately. The tantrums when you're not around, the attention-seeking behavior. Dr. Peterson said it's normal for children his age when they're feeling insecure. When did we take Jake to Dr. Peterson? Another pause, longer this time. A few weeks ago. For his checkup. You were in Denver, remember? Mark pulled out his phone and scrolled through his calendar. Emma, I was never in Denver. And Jake's last checkup was in January. You're confused, honey. You've been traveling so much. Emma, stop lying to me. The mask slipped completely. I'm not lying. Everyone's lying except me. Sarah poisoned Jake against me, your parents believe her manipulative bullshit, and now even you're turning on me. Jake has fingerprint bruises on his ribs, Emma. He fell down the stairs. Kids fall, Mark. They get hurt. Since when is that a crime? He told me you coached him on what to say about his injuries. He told me you said I'd stop loving him if he told me what really happened. Emma's laugh was sharp, bitter. Oh, that's rich. Jake tells one of his little stories and suddenly I'm some kind of monster. But when has Jake ever been reliable, Mark? Really? He's been making things up for months. Name one thing he's lied about before this week. Silence. Emma, in 5 years, give me one example of Jake lying about anything. He said he brushed his teeth when he hadn't. Last month. That's not the same thing as making up systematic abuse, and you know it. There is no abuse. Emma's voice cracked through the phone speaker. There are accidents, and a clumsy child, and a family being torn apart by jealous relatives who can't stand to see me happy. Mark ended the call without another word. At 12:15 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Asterisk Dad, 12:15 p.m. Your mother and I are getting Jake's room ready at our house. He can stay with us instead of disrupting your life further, asterisk. Asterisk Dad, 12:16 p.m. Emma needs our support right now, not more accusations. Family sticks together, asterisk. I showed the text to Mom, who was sitting on my couch with Jake curled up against her side. Don't you dare, she said firmly. That man still thinks this is also misunderstanding that can be smoothed over with family loyalty. But I could see the strain on her face. 43 years of marriage, and she was choosing her grandson over her husband's denial. Everything was splintering apart, just like Emma had warned. At 1:30 p.m., 30 minutes before we were supposed to leave for Jake's CPS interview, my building's fire alarm started blaring. That's weird, I muttered, looking out my window. No smoke, no fire trucks. Jake pressed his hands over his ears, the sudden noise clearly triggering him. Mark was already on his phone with building security. What do you mean someone pulled the alarm manually? His face went pale. Which floor? Okay, thank you. He hung up and looked at me grimly. Someone pulled the fire alarm on the 3rd floor. We're on the 4th. Building security is checking the cameras now. Mom gathered Jake closer to her. You don't think Emma would? I don't know what Emma would do anymore, Mark said, moving to the window. But we can't stay here. Everyone in the building has to evacuate until the fire department clears it. My stomach dropped. If we had to leave the building, Emma could be waiting anywhere. The parking garage, the street, the evacuation area behind the building. And we were supposed to be at the Child Advocacy Center in 30 minutes. There's another way out, I said suddenly. The service elevator in the back of the building connects to the delivery entrance. My friend Danny, who works maintenance, showed me once when the main elevators were broken. Mark nodded. Do it. I'll call Patricia Williams and tell her we might be a few minutes late. As we gathered our things, Jake tugged on my shirt. Aunt Sarah, is Mommy trying to stop us from talking to the helpers? The question was so perceptive it broke my heart. I don't know for sure, buddy. But that's why we're going to be extra careful. The service elevator was ancient and loud, groaning as it descended to the basement level. When the doors opened, I could hear the fire alarm echoing through the building above us, but down here it was muffled. We made it to my car in the underground delivery area without seeing anyone. But as Mark was buckling Jake into the back seat, my phone rang. Building security. Miss Chen? We found who pulled the fire alarm. A woman matching the description of Emma Morrison was caught on camera at 1:27 p.m. She used the emergency stairwell to access the 3rd floor, pulled the alarm, and immediately left the building. Mark heard every word. His jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. She's escalating, he said quietly once I hung up. Sarah, she's never done anything like this before. Emma's always been controlled, calculated. This is desperation. We drove to the Child Advocacy Center in silence, Jake dozing in the back seat, emotionally exhausted from the morning's drama. But as we pulled into the parking lot, I spotted a familiar car. Emma's white Honda Civic, parked directly across from the building entrance. She's here, I breathed. Mark immediately called Patricia Williams. Ms. Williams, Emma Morrison is in the parking lot outside the center. Yes, I can see her in the car. No, Jake doesn't know yet. Through the phone, I could hear Patricia's response. Mr. Morrison, we deal with situations like this regularly. We have security, and there are protocols in place. Bring Jake through the side entrance on Maple Street. I'll meet you there personally. But as we drove around the block to the side entrance, my phone started buzzing with rapid-fire texts. Emma, 1:52 p.m. I can see you. Asterisk Emma, 1:52 p.m. You're really going to make him go through this? Make strangers interrogate our baby? Asterisk. Emma, 1:53 p.m. Jake sweetheart, if you can see mommy's car, I'm right here waiting for you. Emma, 1:53 p.m. This is the last chance to fix this before it becomes official. Emma, 1:54 p.m. Sarah, you have no idea what you've started. Mark leaned over and turned off my phone completely. She can't contact us. Not today. Jake needs to do this without her interference. But Jake had woken up and was looking around nervously. Where are we going again? Remember how we talked about people who help keep kids safe? I turned around to face him. We're going to meet one of them. Her name is Miss Patricia, and she just wants to talk to you about everything you told me and Daddy. Will Mommy be there? Mark and I exchanged glances. No, buddy. Just us and the nice lady who helps kids. As we walked toward the side entrance, I caught a glimpse of Emma's car moving slowly around the building. She was circling like a predator, not willing to give up. Patricia Williams met us at the side door, a kind-faced woman in her 50s wearing a cardigan covered in cartoon dogs. She knelt down to Jake's level immediately. You must be Jake. I'm Miss Patricia, and I have a really cool room with toys and games where we can talk. Would you like to see? Jake nodded shyly, taking her outstretched hand. As we walked down the hallway, Patricia explained quietly to Mark and me, the interview room is completely secure. No one can interrupt or interfere once we begin. Jake will be safe to tell his story without any outside pressure. But I couldn't shake the image of Emma's car circling the building, or the increasingly erratic tone of her texts. This was far from over. The interview room at the Child Advocacy Center looked like a living room designed by someone who'd never actually lived in one, two bright primary colors, toys arranged in perfect rows, cameras disguised as teddy bears on the shelves. Jake clung to my hand as Patricia showed us around. Jake, see that basket of trucks over there? Those are for you to play with while we talk. And there's juice boxes in a little fridge if you get thirsty. Patricia's voice was gentle, practiced. Your daddy and Aunt Sarah will be right next door watching on a TV, okay? They can't come in while we talk, but they'll be able to see and hear everything. Through the one-way mirror, I watched my nephew settle onto a bright blue bean bag with a toy fire truck, seemingly calm. But I could see the tension in his small shoulders, the way he kept glancing toward the door. Mark and I sat in the observation room with a CPS supervisor named David Chin, no relation, despite the shared last name. David explained that Patricia was specially trained in forensic interviewing, that everything was being recorded, and that Jake could stop anytime he felt uncomfortable. How long does this usually take? Mark asked, his leg bouncing nervously. Depends on the child. Anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. Patricia won't push if Jake needs breaks. At 2:47 p.m., Patricia began the interview. She started with easy questions, Jake's favorite color, what he liked to eat for breakfast, whether he had any pets. Jake's answers were barely above a whisper, but he was responding. That's when my phone, which I'd turned back on silent, lit up with an incoming call. Emma. Again. I declined it, but immediately another call came in. Then another. David frowned at my phone's constant lighting up. Ms. Chen, we need minimal distractions during. He was interrupted by his own phone buzzing. Then Mark's. All three of our phones were ringing simultaneously. What the hell? Mark grabbed his phone. She's calling from different numbers. David answered his phone with a sharp, Child Protective Services, David Chin. His face went pale as he listened. Ma'am, you need to stop calling this facility immediately. Yes, I understand you're the mother, but... Ma'am, if you don't cease contact, we'll have to involve law enforcement. He hung up and immediately called building security. We have a parent attempting to disrupt an ongoing interview. Emma Morrison. She may be on the premises. Through the glass, I could see Patricia had noticed Jake's sudden shift in demeanor. He'd stopped playing with the fire truck and was staring at the door like he could sense something was wrong. Jake, is everything okay? Patricia asked gently. Is Mommy here? She said she always knows where I am. My heart clenched. Even in a secure building with trained professionals, Jake was still terrified Emma would somehow find him. Your mommy isn't here, Jake. This room is very safe. No one can come in unless you want them to. At 3:12 p.m., David's radio crackled to life. Security to observation room. We have a situation in the front lobby. David stepped into the hallway, and through the open door we could hear voices from the lobby echoing down the corridor. One voice rose above the others, sharp and desperate. Emma. I have a right to see my son. You people have no authority to keep a mother from her child. Jake shot upright from his bean bag, the fire truck clattering to the floor. That's Mommy. She found me. Patricia immediately moved closer to Jake, her voice calm but firm. Jake, your mommy is not coming in here. The security guards won't let her. You're completely safe. But Jake had started crying, pressing himself against the far wall of the interview room. She said if I ever talked to strangers about our family, she'd make sure I never saw Daddy again. She said she'd tell Daddy I was lying and he'd believe her instead of me. Through our observation window, we could see Patricia making quick notes while trying to comfort Jake. In the hallway, Emma's voice was getting louder, more frantic. My son is being kidnapped by vindictive family members. Where are the police? Why isn't anyone helping me? Mark stood up abruptly. I need to go talk to her. Maybe if she sees me, she'll calm down. No. David had returned, his expression grim. Mr. Morrison, your wife just threatened to call the mayor, the governor, and Channel 7 News unless we release Jake to her custody immediately. She's also claiming you're being coerced by your sister-in-law. That's insane. Mental health crises often are. But we've dealt with this before. Security is trained to handle disruptions without escalating the situation. At 3:18 p.m., Emma's voice suddenly disappeared from the hallway. The building fell eerily quiet. Where did she go? I whispered. David was already on his radio. Security, status report on the mother. The response made my blood freeze. She's no longer in the lobby. Repeat, Emma Morrison has left the building, but we cannot confirm she's left the premises. In the interview room, Jake had calmed down slightly now that he couldn't hear Emma's voice. Patricia was gently coaxing him back to the beanbag. Jake, can you tell me about a time when your mommy got angry with you? Jake wiped his nose on his sleeve and picked up the fire truck again. Last Tuesday, I spilled orange juice on the kitchen floor. Mommy grabbed my arms really tight and shook me. She said I was making extra work for her on purpose. What did you do when she grabbed your arms? I said sorry lots of times. But she kept shaking me and saying I was just like Daddy, making messes for other people to clean up. Mark's hands clenched into fists. In all our focus on the physical abuse, we'd missed the emotional manipulation Emma had been inflicting on both of them. At 3:31 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Asterisk unknown, 3:31 p.m. This is Mom. Using neighbor's phone. Emma showed up at your parents' house. She's telling Dad you've been planning this for months. She has evidence that you've been coaching Jake. Dad believes her. I don't know what to do, asterisk. The web Emma had been weaving was bigger than any of us had realized. And she was far from finished. At 3:43 p.m., Patricia had managed to get Jake talking more freely about the pattern of abuse. He was using the toy fire truck to demonstrate how Emma would corner him in his bedroom, showing Patricia how she'd grab his arms and shake him while telling him he was ruining everything. Sometimes she counts to 10 really slow when she's mad, Jake explained, moving the truck in jerky motions. If I cry before she gets to 10, she starts over and grabs tighter. Mark was gripping the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles had gone white. She was training him not to react, he whispered. Teaching him to just take it. That's when David's radio crackled again. All units, we have a problem. Emma Morrison is in the parking lot with what appears to be a local news crew. Channel 7 van just pulled up. My stomach dropped. She actually called the media. Through the observation room's small window that faced the parking lot, I could see Emma standing next to a news van, gesturing wildly toward the building. Even from 4 floors up, I could see she'd changed clothes. Gone was the disheveled woman from this morning. Now she wore a navy blue dress, pearl earrings, her hair perfectly styled. She looked like the grieving mother she was pretending to be. How fast can she spin this? I asked David, dreading the answer. Fast enough. To the media, this looks like a mother being denied access to her child during a custody dispute. They don't know about the abuse allegations yet. That information is protected. In the interview room, Jake had moved on to describing the practice sessions Emma would conduct after hurting him. She makes me say the falling down story 3 times perfect, Jake told Patricia, still playing with the fire truck. She says if I mess up when Daddy asks, or if I tell anyone the real story, then Daddy will know I'm a troublemaker and won't want to live with me anymore. Patricia nodded encouragingly. Jake, has your daddy ever hurt you the way Mommy does? No. Daddy gives good hugs and reads stories and doesn't grab too tight. Jake's voice became stronger, more confident. Daddy doesn't make me practice stories about accidents. At 3:52 p.m., Mark's phone rang. His face went ashen when he saw the caller ID. It's my boss, he whispered to me. Sarah, Emma's media stunt is about to destroy everything. He answered, stepping into the hallway. I could hear fragments of the conversation through the observation room door. Channel 7 just called for comment. Your wife claims your sister-in-law kidnapped your son. Mark, I need to know what's going on because this could impact the Peterson account. When Mark returned, his face was gray. Emma told the reporter that I'm being manipulated by your family, that Jake's been coached to make false allegations, and that she's been denied access to her son for over 24 hours without any court order. But there is a court order, David interjected. Emergency protective custody was filed this morning. The media doesn't know that. All they see is a distraught mother being kept from her child. At 4:07 p.m., Patricia wrapped up the initial interview. Jake had given a clear, consistent account of systematic physical and emotional abuse spanning at least 6 months. He described Emma's methods in detail, the counting, the coaching, the threats about his father abandoning him. Jake did extremely well, Patricia told us as we moved to a private conference room. His account is credible, detailed, and consistent with the physical evidence you've documented. What happens next? Mark asked. Based on this interview and the photographic evidence of Jake's injuries, I'm recommending that Jake remain in protective custody with Ms. Chen. We'll schedule a formal hearing within 72 hours. That's when David's phone rang. His expression grew increasingly grim as he listened. I see, yes, I understand, we'll handle it appropriately. He hung up and turned to us. Channel 7 is running a breaking news story at 5 o'clock. Local mother denied access to son in controversial CPS case. Emma's positioned herself as a victim of family vindictiveness and government overreach. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother's borrowed number. Asterisk unknown, for 11 p.m. Emma's at the house with a reporter now. She's showing them Jake's room, his toys, family photos. She's crying, saying you've always been jealous of her perfect family. Dad's backing up every word. Sarah, this is getting out of control, asterisk. Through the building's windows, I could see more news vans arriving in the parking lot. Emma had managed to turn Jake's rescue into a media circus, and she was playing the starring role perfectly. We need to get Jake out of here without the camera seeing him, I said, my voice tight with panic. But David shook his head grimly. Ms. Chen, I'm afraid it's too late for that. This is about to become very public, very fast. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse hallway watching Emma being led away in handcuffs. The jury had deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding her guilty on 4 counts of child abuse and 1 count of making false statements to law enforcement. The media circus she'd orchestrated had backfired spectacularly. Channel 7's investigation, initially sympathetic to the grieving mother, had uncovered the browser history Mark found, Emma's research into bruising patterns and injury concealment. When they confronted her with that evidence during a live interview, she'd had a complete breakdown on camera, screaming that Jake was an ungrateful little liar who ruined everything. That footage had gone viral. #Justice for Jake was trending for weeks. The turning point came when Dr. Sarah Martinez, a pediatric abuse specialist, testified about Jake's injuries. She explained how the bruising patterns were absolutely consistent with intentional infliction by an adult hand and impossible to achieve through normal childhood accidents. She also revealed that Emma had never brought Jake for medical treatment despite his frequent falls, a red flag that suggested consciousness of guilt. But the most damning evidence came from Emma's own journal, the one Mark had found. Prosecutors were able to prove that her documented accounts of Jake's behavioral problems were fabricated, with dates that didn't align with Mark's travel schedule or family activities. She'd been building a defense for months, anticipating that her abuse would eventually be discovered. My father had been forced to confront reality when police played him the recorded interview of Jake describing the counting game Emma played while hurting him. Dad broke down completely, finally understanding that his golden child had been systematically torturing his grandson. "Sarah," he'd whispered to me after the verdict was read, "I'm so sorry. You saved him, and I almost stopped you." Emma's sentence was harsh but fair, 8 years in prison, followed by supervised probation and mandatory anger management counseling. She'd also lost all parental rights permanently. Jake would never have to see her again unless he chose to as an adult. Mark had filed for divorce the week after Jake's CPS interview. He'd also quit his traveling job, taking a local position that paid less but kept him home every night. "I have 5 years of bedtime stories to make up for," he'd told the judge during the custody hearing. As for Jake, he was thriving. The quiet, fearful little boy who'd whispered his secret to me that night was now a confident 6-year-old who laughed easily and spoke up when he wanted something. He still lived with me during the week. We'd maintained that routine because it provided stability, but spent weekends and holidays with Mark. "Aunt Sarah," Jake had asked me just last week, "do you remember when I was scared of Mommy?" "I remember, buddy. I'm not scared anymore," he'd said matter-of-factly, then returned to building an elaborate castle with his Legos. That night at my mom's birthday dinner felt like a lifetime ago. The family who'd sat around that table, believing in Emma's perfect facade, dismissing Jake's quiet distress, no longer existed. We'd been shattered and rebuilt, and while we'd lost Emma, we'd gained something more valuable, the truth. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark as I watched Emma's transport van disappear down the street. *Mark, 3:47 p.m. Jake's soccer game is at 6. He specifically requested that Aunt Sarah bring orange slices. I smiled, remembering how Jake used to flinch at the mention of spilled orange juice. Now he was requesting it at soccer games, reclaiming even the smallest pieces of his childhood that Emma had tried to poison. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything you thought you wanted. Sometimes it gives you everything you never knew you needed.